for arrangement? Do you rename digital materials for arrangement and description or maintain their original file names? And how do you mediate this decision making in arrangement and description? We have a few answers already, and I'll keep the chat open too so I can see anything. Um, so one answer is we avoid this wherever possible, but there are cases where we have to for interoperability. For example, characters allowed by Mac or Linux, but not allowed by Windows. Um, Second answer, there are some tidying up to do. If there were dates, we deleted them and added modified dates in the date field. If there's a storage size, we deleted that and added the storage size and file count in the extent field. Otherwise, we keep the gnarly bits of the label information. Finally, we remove illegal characters and add file extensions if they're missing, but otherwise try to touch them as little as possible. And if people were around for the lightning talk session earlier, there was a lot of discussion about this from presented on by David and Lauren at the from Yale. So, if other people, Laura in the chat, besides reasons already mentioned, we may rename at the discretion of curating staff if it seems warranted to facilitate future use. Give people another few seconds to enter answer. Carol provides clarity. We also do assist with long file names. I think the long file names are the issue that I run into the most at my work as well. Reload this page, see if any other answers have come in the last couple minutes. Although, given how long it's taking to reload Airtable, I will probably do less of that in the future. We do have. I like this note here. We record the original file name in our metadata if changes are made. That's something that we strive to do as well. Um, Keep original file names since they are often communicating useful information, not always though. See untitled final dot doc. Certain characters prevent it from being submitted to our digital repository. I feel like we could do a whole symposium on characters and file paths. Maybe that's a good topic for a future event. Um, all right. Oh, and finally, we add the collection number or storage media identifier, which includes the collection number at the beginning of the original file name. We will also shorten the file name if they are impacting our ability to ingest files into our preservation system. So sometimes the limits of our systems are requiring us to do actions on materials that we would not otherwise take. Move on to our next question. What metadata files do you consider musts for inclusion in a SIP? So SIP, for those, I guess we probably all know this, but SIP is Submission Information Package in the OAIS reference model. One answer that's already come in, we've got file characterization output, file system metadata, if the source was from a disk or other media object, the results of our sensitive data review and checksums. And someone asked a follow-up to file system metadata. Do you save and how? What file system metadata do you save and how? This was my answer, so I'll go ahead and say it's the DFXML report that we get from running FiWalk as part of our kind of acquisition steps. So we get that if we are acquiring a media object like a disk, a floppy disk, or a CD that we're running FiWalk on, or a hard drive. But if we're getting stuff from a network transfer, we're not running like there's the walked DFXML you can run to get some file system stuff for non-disk based things. We have not included that in our workflow. Um, in the chat, we also have file manifest with the file name, path, and size. That's a great note, Laura. Seeing if there are other answers to this one. And any migration work done on the file. That's an interesting one, right? So, right, if we're migrating from one format to another, that would be documented as well. All right. Giving another couple seconds, and then I'll move on. How has your institution provided access to digital materials? A couple answers in at the moment. First answer, there are three main ways: dedicated workstation in a reading room, a box folder configured for view only, and a digital repository or digital collections web interface. All three have their affordances and drawbacks, so it really depends on the collection, its contents, and any restrictions that it may have. And another answer, entirely remotely via file sharing. We have a lockdown or no internet, no USB laptop for on-site reading room access, but no one has ever used it. We use file sharing on our own server to send links to researchers, which lead to a password-protected folder. Those links stay active for 30 days, and we'll also, more rarely, send them via email. So running the gamut so far. See if anyone else has anything to add in the chat. Oh, give us just a second to reload. Oh, we do have a couple more here. Um, Online through the preservation system portal mostly. Access to read-only laptop in the reading room if requested, or if there are copyright, privacy, or donor restrictions. Read-only access through cloud for materials that don't have restrictions but can't, go through the into a system for any other reason. It's usually file storage limitations like AV. Uh, this institution uses or provides access via Preservica online for things that can't be shared online. We have users come into the institution and access Preservica via a login. Interesting, on a lockdown laptop, so no USB access, no email access, etc. Another one for a lockdown reading room computer, another laptop. Online file downloading using MASV emulation as a service. I'm not sure what MASV stands for. Someone can put that in the chat. Has only been used on a few times for AV. So some things served up via aviary that have been downloaded from Preservica and served up online, and then a digital collection system that's currently limited to TIFFs, but are planning to support. Oh, I'm sorry, MASV is not an acronym. Thank you, Alice. Currently limited to TIFFs, but they're planning to support PDFs as well. We'll use that for Born Digital at some point. Thanks, Ethan, for the link. If people are interested in Massive, I was not familiar with that one. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. Valencia, do you want to take over for a moment?
Yeah.
So I should click on the next one.
Oh, a big one. Does anyone know of a file directory print program that meets the new federal ADA Title II digital accessibility requirements? Context: for hybrid collections, large amounts of Born Digital, we attach file directories in PDF format to our finding aids as an easy way to allow researchers to keyword search file names without having to encode item level description in EAD. We use Tree Size Pro to make PDFs of directories, and I'm not entirely sure if they meet accessibility requirements. And we have an example link. Um, let's see, we have a couple answers. Maybe not quite the right tool for your particular situation, but I really like Laura's. Hi, Laura. Clever little Python script to generate EAD that can be incorporated into hybrid collection finding aids. And there is a link to the GitHub. Um, and then the other answer is, have you tried TreeSize Pro's HTML export option? That's what I'm starting to implement. And while I haven't specifically assessed I think it would be easier than the PDF export to modify for compliance if needed. And then another person uses Droid to print directories, but it takes some cleanup to be usable for a researcher. Laura says, does an Excel file not meet compliance requirements? As a follow-up question. Looks like nothing's coming through. HTML files are best for accessibility. Thank you, Cliff. Alrighty. Having difficulty with Guy. I should know this. Um, how do you pronounce it?
He is the developer is named is French and his pronunciation is Guy, but I think we've accepted Guy or Guimager.
Okay, thank you. Recognizing my connected 3.5 floppy USB drive. Are you sure the drive can read the kind of floppies that are in there? It took me a minute to realize that my drives just can't deal with double density disks. Um,
While that reloads, I'll also add that sometimes I don't know what you're using as your host for Gimager, if it's BitCurator and if you're using a virtual machine, if the port pass-throughs are set up properly, that could be impacting your ability as well.
Hi, it's
not
me
an
who
issue.
asked the question. I'm wondering if that's the issue is the port pass-throughs. I'm using the virtual um machine option. Someone did mention that, and it feels like there is just not how do I say this? Like no easy instructions online how to get that port pass-through to work.
Mm. Well, maybe this is a topic for one of our breakout rooms as well. Should we go to the next question? For those that have used Archive Manica, is there a way I can get the path to the METS file located in the DIP or the DNIP?
Waiting to see if anyone has answered this one in the forum. We are not Archivematica users, so I don't have even a thought as to this one.
Yeah. Oh no.
So I will put a plug in for there are the archive periodic Archivematica users forums that happen. I feel like they happen more than once a year. At least they're promoted fairly regularly. That might be a question for that organization.
Should I
I
do one more? Since that one didn't, yeah.
sure. I think we have a new one that just came in here. No, let's wait for that one to get some answers.
Anyone have a good means of playback for work files that can be hosted in-house? Hosted in-house as opposed to something like real replayweb.page.
I'll say we don't currently, but it's something I'm interested in. We can
Just
perhaps
looking at the
return
chat.
to this one if more answers come in later.
Sorry, Patrick.
Mhm. I going to the next few don't seem to have any answers associated with them yet, so I'm going to skip a few. Again, they all seem to be from the same person. Apologies already. But I'm going to go to this one that has answers in, and we will keep monitoring the questions that have currently been unanswered. As a new professional, the more I engage and contribute, the more I understand what it means to steward born digital records. My supervisors have and continue to grudge or begrudge the time I spend on these activities. What is a reasonable percentage of time to advocate for? My answer is 20%, but I'd love to hear from others, including how to advocate for this time, especially from supervisors that are analog archivists. So we have a few answers. Much sympathy for born digital archivists who doesn't get to do much born digital archiving these days because it's so time consuming and doesn't produce visible results. I've had minor success with arguing that born digital archives get less accessible every day, that we don't touch them due to all the usual hobgoblins, entropy, obsolescence, file corruption, etc. Unlike analog archives, which can be left on a shelf for 50 years and still be accessible. So if we refuse to process and preserve these, we are actively making a decision to lower the chances that anyone will be able to access them. Imagine if leaving a book on the shelf that the odds of it being able to be read got lower every day. That penny seemed to drop for this person's boss. Second answer, it's tough to have a general answer for a reasonable percentage because it likely involves your institutional context, mission, specific role, etc. In terms of advocacy, you might look to see if your organization or their parent host has policies or requirements around sensitive data handling and subsequently whether you're in or out of alignment with those. You might also look to the types of collections you currently have at your organization and describe or spec out how similar collections would be composed if required today to make a case for more time investment in born digital stewardship. Um, Third answer, 20% seems very reasonable at any career stage. In my estimation, it unfortunately gets harder to make time to learn and engage with interesting problems the longer you stay in the field. Fully encourage you to fight for the time now.
And then
Um,
we do have a hand raised.
oh, yeah. Would you like to go off mute?
Hi. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna drink. This is Marie Chris. One, I'd say 20%. So in my institution, we have a digital curation archivist, and then we have a digital preservation librarian who is me. So right away, you can say that there are whole colleges that have two people devoted to this work. So 20% should hopefully be okay. But one thing that I recommend is looking at the NDSA staffing surveys that can give you some data that you can communicate to your supervisor on how much work is how the staffing that's typically devoted to the digital preservation work. And another thing, if you really want to kind of hit home, like how much work really needs to be done and how much focus needs to be done, is maybe even looking to doing an NDSA levels, preservation levels or DPC RAM, just to show like, wow, all of these activities need to happen. And this is why it's important. So it's kind of, again, like really helping them visualize the work that really needs to happen because it looks like you're just sitting on a computer, right? But it's like, oh, there's all these things that are happening that they're not seeing. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. It's great. Yes, the NDSA staffing survey it comes out every couple of years, and there's actually pretty decent kind of longitudinal data. Um, and Lauren points out there's a new survey coming soon, so the 2021 is already 5 years out of date, but it probably would be a good starting point. Amy in the chat, it was the question not about getting involved in the community. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess there's some question about whether this was about community engagement, getting involved in the profession writ large, or whether working on actually doing the work of digital archives and digital preservation. Yeah, so I think it depends then on what the role you're hired for is and what you're able to get. Um, and obviously, 1 billion full-time employees is the correct answer. I will agree with that. Kari adds in the chat joining the community can also be something like joining the listservs, checking out iPres conference. Those are all great examples. Going to move on to the next one. Um, Going back up here, so I think we do have some answers to this question from earlier. Oh, that doesn't render properly at all. I'm discovering that I need to learn Python. I've vibe coded before and I know HTML, but I need to actually know how to write my own Python scripts instead of relying on an AI that might compromise our workflow. I'm doing a little code academy on the side, but if anyone has learning recs, feel free to drop them here. So we have a couple examples, sorry, answers. Previous two people actually have plugged in Python for Everyone, or maybe that's the same person pasting the link in twice. Previous supervisor having recommended it. I think that's a good resource. I've looked at it a little bit. Um, See if there are other suggestions for learning Python scripting, either from the chat or from the form. I have heard of, oh, Mary Chris, you want to go off mic or off mute again?
Sorry, I'm one of those people who talks too much, but I'm gonna do a plug for Laura, who had a plug earlier for her GitHub Python stuff, but she did a presentation for BPE, I think in 2025 with other of presenters and how they worked on learning how to do Python. And also, I'll let Laura talk if she wants to talk about it. Again, I'm putting you on the spot. I'm so sorry.
Uh, thanks, Marie Chris. Yeah. So also, I believe on this call and was part of that session when it was Carol Cussman. I think she was involved in that session. So I know both of us were involved at various points in some uh, cohorts that were co-sponsored by BitCurator Consortium and Digital Preservation Coalition for folks that were interested in learning or practicing with Python. And I think we both found those to be helpful. I'm not sure that that sort of thing will ever happen again because it required a lot of resources and kind of people willing people with the time to give for that, that it may not be possible to like have that exact program happen again. However, I still think what is possible is to kind of form informal study groups, like to connect with other people, maybe through today, through maybe through like the Discord even, to find other folks that are kind of at the same stage. Because I found that really super helpful. Yeah, I tried lots of different online learning things. I did find library carpentries to be one of the more helpful learning environments because it was focused on Python applications that were much more relevant to the kinds of things I was doing as opposed to like general Python courses, which tend to use examples that are like not necessarily like the type of thing I want to be doing with Python. However, the most helpful thing was just working with other people and having uh, like sharing our questions and working through things together. So that's my advice. There's loads of online resources, but they're kind of overwhelming, I found.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. There are some really good chat answers as well. Uh, I'll put a plug in for local study groups, either at your own institution or, kind of virtual. Charlie has recommended two books that he has taught himself via, I'm sorry, one book and then a response recommending another book. Um, so we can click on those to find out more. Carol has shared the slide deck that y'all did with from the Best Practice Exchange last year. Um, yeah, and then Cliff has another the Python, the library carpentry course that Laura was talking about. So hopefully there's some good resources on that one. We go to this third one here. Has anyone found a good local hosting solution for accepting digital files online without having any programs changing the technical metadata? One answer for this one has been zipping the file before upload tends to help with that. Um, I think that's a good one good example. Yeah, I personally I've seen very inconsistent different platforms do different things with the metadata, right? Yep, package it first, zip, tar, etc. Should wrap some of the file system metadata as well as avoiding any Microsoft legacy format compatibility actions if you're using SharePoint storage, SharePoint. Um, yeah, so it looks like using an archive file format, either zip or tar, and then maybe document as much as you can ahead of time in case those files, especially date metadata is exceptionally fungible. So it's good to document early and often wherever possible. Um, Valencia, do you want to take over for a few?
Yeah, let's do it. All right. Anyone know a good way to check fixity on a file server on a rolling basis and to keep reports for auditing purposes? We've been experimenting with Fixity Pro, which is free now. We love it free and have had good results. You may have to split it into a few scans depending on the size. Another answer is my institution also runs Fixity Pro on their server storage at set schedules and use this reporting function to create TS Separated values, record. There we go. Anyone else? All right. All right. Have others found issues with Baggett overriding the technical metadata, specifically the creation and modification dates of the files inside the bag? Only years ago when we were using that implementation, maybe Bagger, it was over a decade ago, and we were using that application to create bags and zip archive files. If you're using Dart, it will not keep modification dates unless you use the serialization option when bagging. Select tar. Not with Baggett, but I have had issue pretty consistently with Bagger GUI program, graphic user interface. Do you mean the file timestamps change when you bag or later on? I haven't experienced Baggett.py doing so on Linux or Windows. File creation and modified timestamps are file system metadata, not file metadata, and they may change based on other actions or movements between file systems. If you are encountering this frequently, you may save the timestamps ahead of time and separately from the bag, and then reapply them prior to access and delivery. And then Carol in the chat said years ago, knows the folder date changed, but not the file. Bagger.
I'll highlight that distinction the one answer had about the difference between file system metadata versus metadata kind of actually embedded in the file itself. And that's an important one.
Let's see. Yes, with Dart, that's why a good file name manifest matters. And yes, I have never found a way around it.
All right.
You are amongst community.
So I'm trying to find a question that we've not read out yet, but has some answers. I think maybe this one.
All right. Oh, sorry, my Zoom screen's moving. Has anyone else Is anyone else not bagging their SIPs and why? Me. We use Preservica and haven't found it necessary. We did not. We utilize Preservica for digital preservation and it doesn't utilize bags. Looks like Preservica for the win. Um, but Brian said that we do not bag or use Preservica. Laura, we do not use Preservica, but we still don't bag. We just use fixity checking. We got a lot of emoji under Brian's comment. Just everything there. No sips here, only AIP, and we don't use Preservica, Kelsey. Okay. Does anyone have any resources or suggestions for working with born digital architectural drawings? I work for a repository that previously received physical copies of drawings from project managers, architectural firms when a construction project is finished. Over the past few years, we transitioned to receiving only digital files from firms. We are still adjusting some of our workflows to this change. If anyone has any anecdotes or advice specific to digital design and architecture records, I would love to hear them. We have some documentation about working with digital architecture and design records on our GitHub. Thank you for dropping the link. I'm not sure about the BCA public. Not sure about the acronym to shout out the organization properly.
I think that's this Canadian Center for Architecture.
Thank you.
I'll I'll
also.
add, thanks, confirmation there. I'll add, I think it's SAA. So I have not taken this course. Some colleagues of mine in tech services have taken a course, I think from SAA on architectural records in general. They said it spent a lot of its time on physical records, but they did touch on digital materials as well. So that might be worth checking out. I don't have the link handy.
Oh, sorry, this is Kari. Also, Eliza Leventhal, I think, was also teaching that class, but they did a guide for the DPC, and that guide is available online as one of their Tech Watch reports.
Thank you. And then in the chat, Laura said that the SAA design committee, part of the design records section, you don't have to be an SAA member to access. And then Ali put our MIT Design Archive here in Australia has been doing some things with emulation.
I'm waiting for the page to load, but I think we can move on after that one.
All right.
Oh, okay, so we have a few things from chat added here. All right. Um, this one. Had that one already. This is related to an earlier question. Related to the question about advocating for your position. Would people say it is common practice and important that universities have a digital archivist as a faculty or manager instead of a tech support staff to do processing and working with tools? I think so, but SLT seems to have a different idea because it's the leadership. Answer in the chat or answer in the forum. It often depends on how employees are classified at your institution. At mine, a public R1 research, that's the Mellon Research 1 categorization. All archivists are staff opposed to faculty. Um, I would agree. We are a private R1 and our archivists are also classified as staff, not faculty. So this one seems to be fairly concerned with how, probably pretty specific to how your institution's kind of set up like historically. Um, Job security above all, union staff over contingent faculty any day. I think that's it's a great answer. Reading on the chat, not seeing anything. Mary Chris, I think it depends on the structure of your institution and the amount of the policy and advocacy work you want the person to do, right? Some plus ones to that one. All right. This gets back, I think this also follows up on an earlier question or is similar to an earlier question. Can anyone share tips, tricks, anecdotes about working with large data sets with messy directories, such as ones with bad characters and names, excessively long path names, hidden files and folders that have leading periods? Um, we have a script to identify paths and file names that are extremely long. So we're primarily Windows shop. And if we know or can tell that a carrier or source of files were from a Mac, we know to keep an eye out for characters that were incompatible across the two systems. And that is not a perfect solution. Another answer for any Mac files with quote bad characters end quote, ingest from a Linux partition on my computer. If there's duplication, SSDeep can be useful in that case, or just running Brunhilde and doing spreadsheet tricks with the Siegfried CSV because that report will have the checksums. One tool that might be helpful is the command line tool ncdu, which allows you to navigate a directory through the terminal, showing you which directories are biggest, etc. Most OSs have the ability to show hidden files in the file explorer, depending on what you're doing. In Windows, you have to kind of like change a setting usually. Um, that helps. While this is loading, Lara answered the previous question. At the University of Minnesota, archivists and librarians are classified as academic staff and in a category that's considered faculty-like, but not technically faculty, and agree that it depends on a lot of what the expectations of the person would be, especially with regard to research and other professional contributions. Kari helpfully adding, having an archivist who is at a decision-making level with responsibilities is important. Also doing processing often, but being able to directly advocate and working with IT, security, general counsel, risk management, records management is important in her opinion. Those are both great answers. And does anyone have documentation for acquiring and or processing email archives that they can share here? Looking to develop local procedures. So there is a long answer that has a bunch of links in it, so I'll try and parse it. I am actually in a group that is working to pull together a toolkit for this exact purpose. It's still in the draft stages, so I'll provide you with some helpful resources. There's a specification for using PDF, um, email in Copter, the DPC technology reports on preserving email, the future of email archives reports with some tools, and Work Your Email, which is Greg Wiedemann's presentation from his Mailbag tool. Um, yeah, I'll see if there's any other responses in chat to that one. My personal take is that email is it's not a new technology, but it's an area that is still undergoing a lot of different practices, right? Like I feel like I think there's a lot of different institutions are doing different things. I know that we're still hammering it out on our end at my institution. Um, not
Yeah, we're finding at my institution more of the appraisal part,
mhm.
and trying to get donors to not give us their pink statements in their work email. But yeah, it's hard.
um, that chat answer. There's no good way to preserve email. At my last job, it got really messy. I can attest to that. Ooh, we're about to try hosting emails as work files at my institution. Wish us luck. I do wish you luck, Megan. Yep, another chat. We're in the same Valencia. It's all about literacy and appraisal. I've found that appraising the email after it arrives is much more difficult than getting the donor or transferring office to do some appraisal on the front end. That helps out in leaps and bounds. Having good records management and considering what the records are rather than the format of email. Amy agrees that it's horrid to appraise email after it arrives. Yep, it's a good descriptor. Have just finished a huge Mbox project that predates me at the university. Yeah, the appraisal project that I'm involved in and will be probably for the rest of my career. We brought in 2013. So there's these smaller ones that are much easier. This one is like a bear. Um, yep, you're not alone, Alex. There are email archiving woes across the board. Um, we'll do one more and pass it on. I've lost count. Has anyone worked with Fortran files? How do you present them to researchers? Yeah, I've not, but this answer says we would provide them as is most likely rather than emulation. I've provided them when we've done some code releases on GitHub, and here's an example. That's a link to GitHub. I guess that's Joe, right? That's MIT's. Maybe I'm not. I shouldn't assume that it's Joe. There's an example there for one to look at. I agree that I think with something like that, unless you, I don't know how easy it is to. Well, I don't know much about the emulation system for these older systems. Joe, thanks for owning that one. Um, okay, Merry Chris. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I like that. I think there are some Fortran emulators online people can use. Yeah, I've seen, and I've not delved into this too deeply yet, but there's like a project I think called OpenSimH that looks at emulating kind of older mainframe style systems that I'm really curious about. We have some projects that we would like to do at Duke that we've not really had the bandwidth to move on yet. That would involve looking at those sorts of kind of mainframe systems. Gonna reload this, and if there's nothing else, we'll pass on. right. Valencia, I'll hand it to you.
Alrighty. Ooh, are you using generative AR and genetic AI to help with your born digital workflow, accessioning, processing, preservation, access? If so, please share examples. If no, why not? Let me make my screen big so I can see. No, because I don't want to contribute to my own obsolescence and consider generative AI deeply unethical. Hi, it's me, the raging, unimaginative AI stick you've heard so much about. Um, I use Chat GPT and Cloud Code to create Python scripts for various bulk tests, reorganizing files, integrity checking, preservation system downloads, metadata updates, etc. It's been very helpful to reduce the barriers of coding and automation. No, because the risk of exposing other people's information is too high. I can see that there may be truly useful applications for AI. Sorry, my screen just decided to. For AI and transcription metadata creation in the future, but for now, there's too many risks to proceed ethically. We also use AI tools to write scripts for basic tasks and Excel formulas. That has been very helpful and successful. We do not expose collection material to AI because of the data security and ethical concerns. I've seen examples of descriptions of photographs created by Claude, and I'm not impressed. I also have not found AI tools to be reliable or accurate enough to edit metadata. I also I'm also a massive AI skeptic, but our teams use notebook language models for queries. We have put in PDFs, our materials relating to one topic, and can ask it a question that we get. I don't like it, but I'm not the client-facing archivist. I'm using Claude to code and assist me in creating Python scripts for various processes in our workflows, not always successfully. I have deep ethical concerns, but this has quickly become a requirement of my job. I don't feel as though I can opt out. I have argued for creating written guidelines around ethical AI use. For examples, we prefer to use AI to create durable scripts rather than relying on the large language model as part of our ongoing process. I have to admit that I've been able to write scripts this way that I would not have been able to tackle before. No, for all the ethical reasons, I'd feel uncomfortable putting donor data into these LLMs without their consent. I've used it to help me generate some scripts. We've also utilized it to create transcripts for audio video. The task of long-term digital preservation is resource consumptive enough as it is. The last thing we need is to make it worse if we have the option to avoid it. Not much. I've used it to come up with Excel formulas, but I found Google searching is more better because I get better explanations and visuals. And then I have seen the chat been blowing up, or at least I think it's been blowing up. Okay. Um, We have Unimaginative AI Skeptics Unite. I've used AI to help me write Pythons. Other than that, I haven't found anything that was worth the downsides yet from Laura. Brenna also, was saying Unimaginative AI Skeptics Unite. Amy, we have more chat about appraising email after it arrives. Direct conversation there. Interesting to see so many practitioners here say no to AI, but administrators are often pushing it. I wonder what the disconnect is from Kelsey. One thing, James, one thing we have been using LLMs for is transcriptions. I've long been in the opinion that OCR would benefit from a better sense of what language looks like, so it can recognize the whole with the one for the L is not a reasonable guess. Yeah, and then sorry, we are a funny community with these replies, and thank you to whoever brought AI into the conversation. You can see that it's lively and that the opinions go across the spectrum. I here at my institution, we spun up a working group to uh, explore what generative AI can do, and there's been a lot of push from those above us to implement AI, but there hasn't been any guardrails, and so it's just it is what it is. Um, there's Sally said there's a fair amount of magical thinking about what AI should be able to do. When you actually try it, it's just not there yet. And that's what we found too. All right. So maybe we can have an AI breakout room. All right. We just acquired a Fred and plan to install a BitCurator soon. What tips or tricks do you recommend to newbies? Keep hold of the Fred manual and any peripherals. Speaking as someone who's had these items disappear during our office move, crying emoji face. Take really good notes each time you install and update BitCurator. And just to plug BCC, we do have a documentation. Oh, what's the full name? Documentation and training committee that has done wonderful work. I think we mentioned it in the first hour with the GitHub. Um, and so also being part of the community is a good way to find new recommendations and tips and tricks too. All right, let's just looking at the chat. Don't
Yeah,
see
there's a lot
anything.
more about AI.
Yeah, we're okay, I think emails and AI are going to be our breakout room. Let's see. Are there any good tutorials, video preferred, for different tools in the BCE? I've had some success with searching various tutorials on YouTube, but you might hit a few that aren't helpful before you find better ones. It's kind of a crapshoot.
I'll add on that one. The BitCurator Consortium at one time had created our own video tutorials on how to use the tools within the BCE. That proved to be really hard to maintain, both from you have to produce them once, but then the interface changes. It might change subtly, but it might change dramatically between versions, and so it was just I think too difficult and that was under our old hosting arrangement. We could probably revisit that. I think that would be something to think about. But yeah, they were hard to keep updated. I realize that's about the specific BitCurator environment and not necessarily like how do you use FiWalk? That might have a different, because that tool is used outside of BitCurator in other contexts, right?
Who wants to be a BitCurator influencer and makes those videos?
We we could budget next year in the BCC for a ring light.
I mean, is Sarah Rogers on the line? Sarah Rogers is our treasurer for BCC.
All right. I think moving on to this one. When folks provide access to born digital archival records through their digital asset management systems, how do you put the material up? A single zip file per dip? A collection of individual files? Do you include, for example, Brunhilde reports? A couple answers here. We upload a single zip per dip to our DSpace-based system for born digital records that can be made completely open and accessible online. So that's a caveat there. Um, the files within that zip are bagged for easier validation after download. We include a directory tree, a file in .text, and a droid report in .csv. We definitely do not include process files like Brunhilde reports, since they often reflect information that gets weeded out of the final preservation file set. For instance, if accessioning flags PII and we agree to discard that file, no sense in having the bulk extractor report with the PII hit available to the public. And seeing if there are any other answers to this one. I think, like a lot of places, a lot of answers so far, this will be pretty dependent on what systems are available to you and what you've agreed on. It depends in a camel case with some ASCII art. Yeah, I think everything kind of depends. We don't make our Brunhilde reports or metadata about a collection available by default, but I think we could address making that available if somebody were to ask us. We've never been asked for it, but we do, we save that stuff for obvious reasons. Um, in the chat, I think there's just more talk about uh, uh, making videos. Kari, this question about how many places are making their how-to and procedures and workflows available online to colleagues. That's a good one. I think that's another one where it kind of depends on what the systems that we're using are. Like, there's a lot of our material that I don't have any problem with making public, but the documentation site that we've used by the university is restricted to staff. So, like, I can make individual PDFs of stuff available, but it's not, we'd then have to update it, right? That's
Yeah.
just one example.
That's part of that community building someone asked about earlier too. It's
Mhm.
one way to contribute would be to put up stuff like that.
That was another thing that the BCC did early on in our existence. Like when we first founded, we had like a workflow repository for institutions, for members that were using BitCurator and in their workflows. And the problem of keeping it updated was really challenging again, because I might contribute something now, and 6 months from now, we change our workflow slightly or dramatically, and then we have to remember to send a copy to another organization. Um, Are there other thoughts on how we provide archival records in digital asset management systems? I'm not seeing anything in chat. Um, does anyone have a workflow for pulling materials out of digital storage for processing and then putting them back into storage? I'm interested in how this happens, who's responsible for it, and what that processing space looks like. So we've got one answer. We use Amazon Web Services as a storage location for unprocessed archival information packages. We make the request to call down the data to a local processing workstation, not a Fred, but one like it. And once processing is complete, we transition into a new ape. The updated ape is then moved to the processed AWS storage. A separate dip is generated for users and stored elsewhere. The first version of our ape on unprocessed storage is deleted once confirmation of the processed ape is uploaded. We currently use event records in archive space to document this workflow. In the chat, Laura says, this question is one of the reasons why we decided not to use Archivematica. We'd rather have an iterative process. Other, I'm reloading to see if anyone else has answered. I won't go into the details, but our process is similar to this one, just we don't use AWS for it, but we have a similar, like, download it from a unprocessed location to a local workstation, do some work, upload it to a process location, confirm and delete. It's a little more manual than I would prefer, but it works for now. Yeah, Lara is similar to that. Okay. One more here. How do you stay connected to other digital archivists and keep up with the field? We would love a variety of general answers, but feel free to use this space to hype up your local group. All right, so we have several answers so far. We have BCC community calls. That is a good plug for the BCC and their community calls. They happen almost every month. Joining committees for planning conferences like IPRES and DSA. Also, the BCC has committees, I'll say. um, NDSA and DPC, those are two other plugs, are the two main ones for this person. They both offer free meetings and meetups that anyone can join. Yeah, the DPC has offerings that are both for everyone and for members only. NDSA, I think they're reviewing their membership model. Is that correct? Someone can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. Um, And then there's attending conferences like NDSA, BPA, BPE. I'm going to insert the BitCurator forum in that one too. Making an effort to talk to people once there. I do wish I kept more up to date on publishing, but a lot of the literature in our field seems more blog-based rather than formal publications, maybe because the work changes so quickly. There's a plug for some Philadelphia orgs, though, the Delaware Valley Archivists for physical archivists and adjacent special collections folk, and the Digital Archivists Philly for digital archivists. These are both great. In the chat, we've got a plug for regular calls with colleagues that can be informal, right? And there's could be people that you met at a conference or people that you just know from being local. Um, I'll reload this page. There has been more in the chat on processing spaces and checking things out and checking them back in. Charlie has asked Artifactual to consider something like that for the Archivematica roadmap, but hasn't had any luck so far. Um, Maria Chris only takes in process collections to their system because they work with Archivematica. That's an interesting, but minimally cataloged counts as processed. Okay. Um, and they do pull downs and re-ingest for things that have been deaccessioned. Um, Clarification from Laura, they're often reprocessing or adding new accruals to existing collections. I'd say we do that a lot too. Um, Yep, various server directories for files that are apes and files that are being currently actively worked on, processed in some way. Shout out for Philadelphia. It's a cool town. Um, yeah, Kelsey says DPC is expanding a lot too, but you do need to be a member to access a lot of their communities. I agree with that one. Um, and then a comment on the kind of blog-based professional literature. Kari talks about the iPress conference website. There's a lot of conferences and papers and presentations on that website going back for, over 20 years now. And those are um, peer reviewed and kind of published in a more formal place if we're looking for more formal publications. The Mastodon server digipres.club is a good mix of digital archives hobbyists and workers. That's a great place if you're on Mastodon. Um, all right. Valencia, are you up now?
Yes. Ooh, any tips or tricks for opening Word 1998 files that appear to be corrupted and consist of random symbols? I've tried LibreOffice. Have you looked at emulation or this is where my eyes or EASI? We use Quick View Plus to view old file formats, and then there was a link to it. Yeah. Good luck.
Sorry, hit the reload key at the wrong time. It's a wired connection at an R-run university, y'all.
Anti-word anti-word pre-installed in BCE.
I think this is
And +1 to quick view, but also, are you sure they're Word and not another 90s word processing software masquerading as Word?
yeah, that's a good point.
Laura said would love to use EASI, but you can't just decide you're going to use it. There are some barriers. Kari put an extension. Jacob said, I've heard tell that if you get your hands on the Word Perfect installer disk, it's good for opening and migrating older MS Word files. Laura definitely use QVP, and also there are other helpful program called FileView Plus, but it's not as good as QVP, but it's a lot cheaper and fairly helpful for some file formats. Chains was just reading someone reminiscing on how docs Word files were very fragile. It might just be corrupted and dropped a link. WPS is the word perfect format, and you can always sometimes download legacy software from the Internet Archive. So we have great suggestions in the chat.
Kari, the WPS extension is not necessarily like true for all versions, right? Like our university was a WordPerfect shop, and we have tons of examples of administrators just choosing their own three-letter extension for the type of file, like the type of
Right.
word processing document they were creating, which has confused processors. Like, what is .let is what this one faculty member decided to use for all of his letters.
Letter. Yeah.
You're muted, Valencia.
That's what I get for having the chat full screen and trying to read. Kelsey, you might also want to do a robust file format identification against pronom to verify versions, etc. James has also encountered WordPress files saved as .doc. LibreOffice was able to convert them, though. All right. Next question. Has anyone begun work trying to remediate Office documents, docx, PPT, PDF, etc., at scale to comply with Title II requirements that your institution interprets to cover digital collections? Any ideas for working on this problem at scale? Yes, and it's hard. In all caps, we created transcripts for all of our digital materials even before Title II, but we have to put in a lot of effort to cleaning those up and making sure they have proper hierarchy and description for screen readers. Our Scholars Archive, IR, is facing this at a much greater scale as ETDs were previously submitted via PDF, which we have found to be the devil when it comes to remediation. We don't have a perfect model yet, but we did change submissions to docs files, but we are also moving to a new repo that is better prepared to meet our accessibility needs. We are hoping to one day host ETDs as our HTMLs. Our institution has only done this for digital collections, digital surrogates of analog archival material, a lot of which is in PDF format. We've sought and received approval for PDF remediation software. I have a fundamental problem with doing accessibility remediation for digital archival material because this constitutes considerable alteration to the archival material and in my mind affects authenticity. This is considered in the Title II regulation exceptions, but I'm not 100% sure this holds water for our particular digital archives program. So I'm interested in what others have to say about this as well. So far, no, the digital collections management team have focused their efforts on getting Title II carved out for collections. On the archive side, we're focused on materials created specifically by/for the archives, like the transcripts for oral history projects run by colleagues here. So more like avoiding future remediation by getting at the start. And then we have some chat. More about file extensions and concern with making work accessible. Right. Hello, welcome. I'm a newbie solo archivist at a community archive currently using SoundCloud embeds for oral histories in Omeka. I know OMS is an option, but I'm wondering what alternatives others are using for hosting and embedding oral history audio. Ideally looking for something more preservation friendly and sustainable than SoundCloud. Any recommendations? Hoping that they're backed up somewhere else too, and SoundCloud is for access. Most browsers can deal with it just linking to audio files if you can host them somewhere, even if it's just Google Drive, AWS, etc.
While this reloads in the chat, Laura had added about lack of clarity as to whether Title II applies to Born Digital Archives, but there's a difference between what is obligated and what's desirable to do. We're interested in our collections being as accessible as possible, balancing with feasibility. And it's not just Title II. There's another national law that I cannot remember that requires we make information accessible upon request. Title II is for online only. Yeah, I don't know if there are any other thoughts on options for more preservation, sustainable storage rather than SoundCloud. Jacob in the chat, am I referring to sunshine laws? I'm not sure. This was a comment from someone in chat, Marie Chris.
Yeah.
We're wrapping up around 4:15. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got just a few more minutes. I'll try and do um, Preservicus starter, depending on size, I suppose, for this one. See if there's anything new that hasn't been user direct answers. Answers. All right, let's go here. How do you determine which materials can be accessed online, remotely, and which materials researchers must come into the reading room to use? Is it just based on donor stipulations, collection size, something else? Several answers to this one already. For us, it's been hard to have a written policy for this because it depends on the collection and the material type. I don't provide online access to material that contains intellectual property of those other than the creator of the collection. I also don't provide online access to material the donor has not given explicit permission to publish online. As a result, our approach to access is very different for university records versus personal papers. Second, honestly, I've yet to encounter a Born Digital collection that I wouldn't provide access to remotely. It would take a weird Venn diagram of overlapping concerns that would land a collection in a space where we would allow access, but only in-person access, and not just restrict the collection or files like we would with a paper-based collection. We try to have the same determinations as our physical material. If you would restrict it in the reading room, we restrict it to only being viewed in person. This only differs when we consider the fact that our website is very well indexed and our digital materials are very discoverable once they go online. If we think the materials require more context than what can confidently be provided on the website, we will describe the materials but not upload the access copies. Finally, our curators make the decision based on organizational policy. For example, university records are restricted for a certain period of time. Our local policy, for example, certain material types are restricted to protect third-party privacy. General assessment of whether materials may be sensitive for the donor or organization or for third parties. And as we're wrapping up, those were actually that's a good topic maybe to end on. But as we're running short on time, Laura has added in the chat a list of topics that seem to have some engagement and might make for good breakout sessions. You can add an emoji to ones that you would be potentially like to see breakout rooms for. So we've got advocating for time and for digital processing, emulation for access, learning Python, appraisal, especially email appraisal, AI applications in digital archives, successful uses, why or why not, and accessibility, Title II remediation. Um, while people are voting with their thumbs, just going to read Marie Chris's message about access. volunteering for a community that was sensitive to oral histories done in the 1970s, and they weren't aware that their oral histories would be searchable and findable online and would only be made available to researchers. Members of that community referenced in the oral history are still alive and may not appreciate being referenced online. Yeah, I think we've had similar cases where we've been had interviews conducted, 40, 50 years ago, and have struggled with how to provide access to them since then. Yeah, the gossip is real. That's right. Um, all right. I think this brings us to the end of this session. I don't